The primary purpose of this introduction to part 4 of the course is to motivate you to want to take part 4 more seriously and to want to engage deeper in the material. Now, although I'm going to be using some examples from popular media and the news and other sources, current events, I don't intend for this introduction to be political, even though it might be construed as such given the examples that I'm going to choose. Now, foremost, I want to say that things are not fine. Things are not fine in education or even in science for that matter. The current administration has all but eliminated the Department of Education at the federal level. And what some people might not realize is that one of the sub-agencies within the department is the Institute of Education Sciences. And that arm of the department has lost nearly all support. And that is the arm of the federal Department of Ed that supports and funds research projects to help educators and the field of education in general acquire more knowledge, learn more about things that seem to be working and seem to be helping us accomplish our goals as educators, and things that aren't. And one of the many benefits of that arm of the department is the creation of something called the What Works Clearinghouse. And although some of the methods used to identify research that could constitute evidence-based practice that works for educators it is sometimes questionable how certain studies are examined and approached, but the entire operation is done very scientifically, and it leads to some very good professional standards of practice that we can adhere to as we move forward as educators, and that is all but gone. And that's just one of the many ways in which the elimination of the Department of Education, either through just pretending it doesn't exist anymore or just firing all the people who actually work there, regardless, the entire process is devaluing our field. And not just in education, but there are other decisions that are being made in the current administration that are having a profound negative impact on the amount and type of research in general that the federal government is supporting. So on the one hand, we have evidence that our field of education is being devalued, but also it seems to be that scientific discovery and scientific support for many fields, particularly in the healthcare field, that is being compromised right now. And when you couple that with other issues related to how decisions that are being made right now in the current administration are making it more difficult for people to afford going to college, and it's making it more difficult for people who are in vulnerable populations who have specific needs to be supported in those needs. And the one thing that we know for sure, because of research that has been done up to this point, but doing something like eliminating DEI programs or initiatives within organizations, whether they're in schools or in businesses, that those programs have been, generally speaking, proven to support the people who need the support. And so not being scientific about trying to evaluate effectiveness and then eliminating things that may not be effective, which is not a bad thing, but not doing it in a scientific way is an affront to the value that we as a society are placing on science. So I want to present an example of sort of how much you have to be on your guard in order to recognize when things are not being approached from a thoughtful scientific perspective where they probably should be. And one of the reasons why you have to be on your guard is that some of the language used sounds scientific, but when you look closer, you realize it's kind of just the opposite of that. So here's an example. This is the current Secretary of Health and Human Services Department in the United States. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he's being interviewed about his stand on how the country responded to the COVID pandemic, and also our stance as a country on vaccines. And this was one of the perspectives, or one of the issues, that he was running against when he was trying to consider a legitimate run for the presidency. So just take a look at this very short clip.
100 studies that show that ivermectin had profound benefits, generally speaking, a 70 to 85% reduction in hospitalizations and deaths. It was really a miracle drug, particularly in the later pandemic.
But I think if that was all in like Bangladesh or South America, it could be because
it was all over the world.
Parasites.
It was all over the world. The countries where they use it for parasites, Nigeria, which has the highest river blindness burden in the world, did have the lowest COVID death rate in the world. They use both. They also have the biggest malaria burden, so virtually the entire population is on hydroxychloroquine, and a large part of the population is on ivermectin for river blindness. So, and they had almost no vaccination. They had, I think, something like 1.3% vaccination. So they did very well. But there are states in India, sort of side-by-side states, like Kerala and Uttar Pradesh, where Kerala used our protocol and had the same comparable death rates, and Uttar Pradesh used ivermectin hydroxychloroquine and ended the pandemic overnight. But there's also, if you go in the literature, and there's a doctor called Meryl Nass who has assembled a lot of these, so that you can go on her website and see them, or Harvey Risch, who's the Yale epidemiologist, has also assembled them. There's 400 studies that show benefits from hydroxychloroquine, over almost 100 studies, I think 99, that show extreme benefits, like devastating benefits of ivermectin. And there's a handful of studies that are government-produced, WHO-produced, financed by Bill Gates, that say that there was no benefit, but those studies have a lot of problems.
So one of the things that Kennedy says in the interview is, he says, well, if you go into the literature, and then he references two doctors, two scientists, Meryl Nass and Harvey Risch, I believe, and he references them and their research, or at least their review of the research and the literature regarding the efficacy of anti-malarial drugs and horse parasite drugs on their ability to either treat or prevent the spread of COVID. And it sounds semi-legitimate when it just rattles off of his tongue. But if you look more closely at the people that he cites and the criticism against them by the established scientific community, you will soon learn that there is, in fact, absolutely no credible, good science evidence that either of those two treatments that Kennedy speaks of has any noticeable impact, positive impact, on the treatment of people with COVID. And again, you don't have to believe me. You can go into the literature, the system that we have in place now, and you can review the many, many, many good science studies that negate the conclusions that he's making. Now he made all of those before he was the secretary of HHS. So it's even more important for him and people like him to examine the scientific literature with a critical and with a literate eye. And that's actually what Part 4 is about. Part 4 is about learning more about what it means to be scientifically literate. In our case, literate in the area of research that is done with educational variables and the educational variables of interest that you identified. So this is about being literate. And I will tell you right now, I personally believe and think and see and feel, me, that we are heading into a very dark time. Actually, we're not heading there, we are there. Never in my life have I seen things happening in the name of our country, or by our country, in the name of I don't know what. But I've never seen so much hatred, so much decision making that is happening that is sort of seems to me to be coming from a place of hate. And that is darkness. And it's also coming from a place of extreme ignorance. And as we head into these dark times, there is a light. I believe there's a light, and I believe that light is knowledge. It's a true and deep understanding of what it means to think scientifically when scientific solutions are needed. And also what it means to think scientifically and rationally when you need to make good decisions. Not just on how to treat other human beings, but also what policies are we going to establish? What things are we going to support as a population, as a country, as a nation here and abroad? And it makes me sad. Every day I wake up and I get more and more sad at what's happening. And especially as an educator, especially in education, there is no denying that these are dark times, and education in general is, to me, seems very much under attack. And our defense will only be not being ignorant, is stamping out ignorance in our profession, in our jobs, and in the jobs of the people who are the decision makers. And so I will just tell you right now, you might not see it directly, but all of the things that you're going to be learning and applying in the final part of the class is an application of good science. And in part 4, it includes the final project for the class, and the final project I think is very fun. It asks you to design a study that might be able to support a hypothesis about something that you're learning more about in terms of scientifically based principles of learning and teaching. And but it's going to be mixed method, where you apply certain elements of quantitative research that you hopefully learned about in part 2, and then elements of qualitative research that you just finished learning more about in part 3, and it puts them all together. And then there's some other things related to doing good science, related to sampling and measurement and analyzing data, and all of that, understanding all of that better. It aids in being able to understand whether or not science, the science that you might be reading about, and maybe not necessarily carrying out yourself, but at least reading about it, whether or not it is valid and makes sense. And I only wish that people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. were less ignorant about good science. And I mean that not just for that federal agency, but also many of the other agencies that are currently being staffed by people who don't have the background that you would think they would need in order to not be ignorant about the decisions that they have to make. Unless, of course, they're making them based on a whole different set of rules, which is certainly always possible, isn't it? So as you move forward through this final part of the class and beyond into the rest of your studies, in your graduate program, in your professional practice, and in your life in general, I encourage you to take what you learned, think scientifically in your life, remain skeptical, make good observations as you can, identify things that don't make sense to you, and pursue a way to solve problems, or at least to investigate possible reasons why things don't make sense, and reasons why, and strategies for trying to solve such issues, or trying to resolve such problems. You know, as a graduate student, there is a hidden curriculum in grad school, you know, and that hidden curriculum fundamentally could be considered questioning the knowledge. And that's what really needs to be done right now more than ever. There's a lot of information that's coming our way in the field of education. A lot of decisions are being made, and everything needs to be scrutinized. You need to remain skeptical, and you need to question, always question. So anyway, I hope you enjoy part 4 of the class. You have a little extra time now than you did in the previous weeks, because you get more than a week to not to prepare for the final exam number 4 if you're taking it, but you do have extra time to complete the project. So partly because it's a little bit more in depth. So anyway, as always, please let me know if you have any questions, comments, and if there's anything that you would like to discuss about the class, or about anything, my politics, I don't know, anything. Just please reach out to me. All right, we'll see ya.
This is fine.